How's it going? Good. That's actually like a joke that would have been lost on me a month ago. I'm not on Instagram or, kids. I'm Caleb. I work for Titan. Yep. I co-host a podcast with my buddy Daniel Colborn called 20% Time. Does anybody listen to 20% Time? Like, hands? I'm doing some market research. Okay, a couple people. I tweet things on Twitter, mostly about Laravel. So, I have a story to tell. So this is what my front-end files, my Blade files, used to look like. Does this look familiar to anybody? You got some section body or content, a bunch of HTML in Blade, and then you have maybe a script tag at the bottom for some extra sprinkles or some extra sauce, with some jQuery or raw JavaScript or whatever. Then I watched a Laracast and discovered Vue, which was totally amazing. And it blew my mind, but not much changed. So my files still looked like this. I had some HTML and Blade at the top, and instead of that jQuery at the bottom, I was pulling in the Vue CDN now instead of the jQuery CDN and creating these new Vue instances. So that was pretty sweet. Then I got into Vue components. Seemed like the next step, like this is, it was still everything I kind of knew and loved about those Vue components, but they were reusable, or about the Vue instances, but they were reusable, and the JavaScript was in a separate file, so it felt a little bit more mature to me. And then I was using this inline template syntax, so it was different, but I was still using HTML and Blade, so it wasn't too different. Then something happened. These bad boys. .vue files, single file Vue components, the Blade murderers. They killed Blade. This was the thing that killed Blade forever. The half of you that say, oh, I never write Blade anymore. This is why. Single file Vue components. So it seemed like the next step. It seemed like, well, I already have these components. I already have all the JavaScript in a separate file. I'm just going to start storing everything in that file, and I'll have all my template stuff right along with my JavaScript stuff, just like it was before. Before my .vue files, this is what used to come back from customer support. This was a simpler time. Then you get these guys. Bloody red console logs with stack traces that make 0 sense to anyone. Endlessly loading font awesome spinners. FA spinner, FA, anybody? Yeah? Yeah, they never stop. Whoops, something went wrong. Sweet alert messages with no help for the user. They just hit OK, and then they reload, and it does it again. And that's that. And worst of all, the front-end tragedies. Fully passing tests. Green as grass, PHP unit, sheer confidence in my front end. Let's dive into the belly of the beast. These single file Vue components, kind of open it up. Enemy territory. Twitter timeline, this is a little Vue component I wrote for the talk. It's a Twitter clone. It's live pulling Nova updates. The new serverless CMS for home automation that Taylor released. So at the top we have some tweet input where you type your hot tips, then you tweet it out. Then we have some fresh tweets, incoming tweets, then we have our in case you missed it tweets, the ones that haven't been read yet. So this is going to be kind of the platform of the talk. I'll take a sip of water, you can read my jokes. Okay, Taylor, no talent. So let's dive in. This is the single file Vue component. Here's the template tag at the top of the file. Pretty simple. We have a tweet input component. That's where you type in the hot tip tweet. And then the loading spinner that loads the font awesome sweet spinner. And then the tweets component where we put in the fresh tweets and in case you missed a tweet. So pretty straightforward. Then you got your data object. So in a Vue component, this is kind of the beating heart of the Vue component. All the data, the reactive data, the stuff that you change, and that when you change it, the template updates, that all happens right here. So does this look familiar to anybody? Like what's going on in this data object? Is anybody like, yeah, those are what all my data objects look like? This became kind of an idiom, at least for me. This loading, busy, maybe working, errors, and then the data that you store the stuff in, and this thing that you bind to the input element, and then you clear it when you post it. So that's where we're at there. Then we got our created hook. This runs when the component loads. And in this, we're using Axios to call on an endpoint to get all the tweets. We're saying like, server, get me all the tweets. Once we get them, we kill the loading spinner, and we store those inside this.tweets. If something goes wrong, we, of course, sweet alert with an empty middle parameter there. Nothing helpful for the user at all. Or you console.log, or you just leave it blank, or you don't even put the catch statement. So computed properties, we have fresh tweets, and in case you missed the tweets, computed properties in Vue are treated just like data. So in your template, you use them just like you would use a piece of data, but they have a little bit of magic on top. So we have those tweets that we got from the back end, and then we have fresh tweets, and in case you missed the tweets, where we're just filtering based on unread. Here's kind of the body of the thing. This post tweet method, it's pretty gnarly. There's lots of state going on. We set some busy state. We throw out the tweet to the server. The server hands it back. If it's successful, we kill the busy wheel or grayed out or whatever. We construct our own little tweet and push it on there, and then we clear the input. If something goes wrong, this time we do something a little more useful. We check to see if it's a 422, like it's a validation error from Laravel, and we do something with it. If it's not, like a 500, we do whatever we do with those sweet alerts. So that's kind of the lay of the land. Here's like a diagram to maybe, I'm going to use this as kind of a health check as we go. We're going to check back into this. It's to show kind of how the data flows throughout our component. Over there, you got your server on the left. That's the Laravel backend. On the right, you have your UI or your template tag. And then in the middle is the whole Vue component and all the parts of the Vue component. So at first, we load up the Vue component, the created hook gets called, we say, hey server, give me the tweets. The server says, here are the tweets. The created hook says, okay, store them in the data. And then we take that data and it goes through the computed properties, fresh tweets, and in case you missed the tweets, and to the UI. Then the user's typing their tweet, they hit the button, we fire off the post tweet method, we go off to the server and say, hey, post this tweet. The server says, okay, I did or I didn't. And then we take that tweet, we do this.tweets.push, and we push it up onto the data. So that's kind of where things are at. There's so many moving lines. Data's flowing like all over each other. It's this big spaghetti, Dr. Octopus type diagram. And this is where things were at for me. This is what all my components looked like. And it felt so right. Like every step I took to get to this point, I felt like I was making an improvement on my apps. I felt like, oh, I'm using Vue, I'm using data-driven, I'm not binding to events. Like, oh, I'm using Vue components, oh, I'm using single file, oh, my build is so long, you'd love it, it's great. Like, it's Webpack, and it's this and that. And then when I go to meetups, I'm not just saying I'm a Laravel developer, oh yeah, I'm a Vue, oh yeah, it's just like React, oh, I know React, you know, and then you feel like a part. So that's pretty much the motivation why I'm doing all this. Thank you, right? Am I right? So every step I took, it felt like the right thing to do, but I ended up in a place where I was scared of my front end. I had this low-level anxiety. I didn't mean this as like an innuendo. I really didn't. That's why there's no emoji next to that. So I was scared of my front end. I had this like low-level fear that I'm going to hit deploy, and then everything's going to blow up. I'm going to get something back from customer support. Or you go into Bugsnag, and you have the top 10 JavaScript errors that happen 4 million times, and you can't reproduce them, and you can't read the stack traces. This is where my life was at. So how do we do better? How do we get out of this state, this thing we're reusing, we're doing the same thing over and over again? We can JavaScript better. That's an option. We could use form objects. We could wrap up our Axios calls, you know, wrap up some of that monotonous busy state and all that stuff. We could use Axios interceptors to handle those catch statements and the 422s all over the place and not have to do that every time. We could use Vuex to centrally manage state. We could use Jest to component test everything, and we could use ViewRouter to disconnect the whole thing completely and not have to worry about it. But that's not what this talk is about. Because down that road lies complexity, more and more and more complexity. Every tool you step into, more and more complexity till you're wading and you're neck high in complexity and you're drowning in your own front end. Again, I'll stop using that word. So we're going to Laravel better. That's what this talk is about. It's about Laraveling better. All this stuff you already know how to do. Laravel is server-side rendering out of the box. You get a router out of the box that writes to the history API out of the box. So all these amazing things, it handles state beautifully. It's great. So let's see, in all seriousness though, like there's so much good in Laravel, and my journey has been backpedaling, being like, I don't want to get rid of Vue. I love Vue. This isn't a talk about just going back to writing jQuery. I love my single file Vue components, but I went too hard on it. So this is a talk about stepping back and redeeming some of those things that we had before in Laravel. We're gonna take our Twitter clone and we're gonna refactor it in 4 steps, and that's the talk. Use props. Don't be scared of window.location.reload. Move logic from JavaScript to PHP, and use forms. Ye old form tag. Use props. All right. So here's what we got. There's a fun, awesome loading spinner. Iconic. We load up our page, and we're waiting for the data to come in. Why are we waiting for the data to come in? Why is this loading spinner there? For no reason other than because we're using single file view components, right? Like it wasn't a rational decision. It was that we didn't have blades. We weren't passing tweets anymore. We were using single file view components, and we're like, well, then I guess I have to get it from Ajax, and then I guess I have to have this loading state. And so let's see if we can kill that. Before, if I wanted to kill that, I would have done something like this. JavaScript : put tweets, right? This is a package that Jeffrey Wade put out a while back called PHP Vers to JS. Yep. And so you would do this sort of thing, and then in your JavaScript, this is our .view component, you would call it with window.tweets. So it would be kind of put into the global window object in JavaScript, and then it would be made available. And this works. This will work. But the question, where did this come from? You can't draw a line from JavaScript put to window.tweets. It's like 2 ends here, and there's this gulf in the middle. So it always felt really bad to me. I felt like, well, that can't be right. Like, I'll have to do that sometimes, but it just kind of feels weird, and I didn't really like it. So I thought, Ajax, like that's the right way to do it. So I figured I would do that. And then I read a blog post by Jesse Shute from Zangle. These guys are awesome. Their blog is amazing. And the blog post is titled, Sharing Data in a Laravel View Application. It speaks to the hybrid Laravel View app developer like myself. And he outlines a bunch of ways that we can get data from Laravel into Vue.js. And one of those ways is using Vue props. So he goes and he shows in your blade file with your one-liner, you can pass in a prop and just use blade to echo data into it. So instead of doing this JavaScript put thing in our controller, we just return the view and pass tweets along with the view like you would in the olden days of Blade. And then in your Blade file, when you have your single file view component, you can then define prop and JSON encode and just echo with Blade into that prop. So this was a light bulb for me. This was a moment where I went like, oh my gosh, I can do this? The funny thing is, I kind of knew that you could do this all along. I knew that this was a possibility, but I needed permission from a pro to tell me, like, you have permission to do this, which is a shame. Like, I should have been able to do that on my own, but I wasn't. I needed Zangle to say, you can do that. And so once I got that light bulb, I just started using it. So let's check it out. We pull in the prop at the top, we assign it right there, and then we can kill our whole created hook. So take a look at that, grok the code. So why initial tweets? So yesterday, if you caught in Sam's talk, she had votes, and she used data votes, so it's just a pattern. But props are immutable. You can't change props. So initial tweets is immutable. We can't change any prop that comes in. But data, you can change. We can change tweets. So we pull in the prop because we can't change it if it's a prop, so we assign it to the tweets thing right away when the view component boots up, and then we're good to go. All right, so here's our template. We had our loading spinner before. We can kill the whole loading spinner. And we can kill the VLs. And we can kill the loading data. And there we go. Now when we load the page, there's no fun awesome loading wheel. It just loads right away. All right, so what about the tests? So here's our can retrieve tweets test. We create 5 tweets with a model factory. And then we hit the JSON endpoint, and we make sure there's 5 things in JSON. Super simple index type API test. So now we're not getting JSON, so we're just getting, and this endpoint doesn't even exist because we're loading the data right with the page. So now we're just getting the route, and then instead of assert JSON count, because we're not getting JSON, we're getting back a full Blade page, we're asserting view has tweets. So we're making sure that this tweets object is available in the view. That's what this Laravel helper is. And the second parameter is a callback, where if you return true, it passes the assertion. If you return false, it fails the assertion. So I'm just saying, make sure that the view has tweets and that there's 5 of them. So these 2 tests, they're the same exact tests. They're a different syntax for a different paradigm, but they effectively test the same thing. So you can still keep that testing mentality that you have with the API-driven approach with this new approach. So here's where we left it off with all the squiggly lines. We killed our created hook, so we can get rid of all those lines. And then we're passing initial tweets directly through as a prop. And then we're storing it into this.tweets, the data item. So that's where we're at. So use props. All right, don't be scared of window.location.reload. Hi, Mom. So we type hi, Mom, and you see there's that little busy state. The whole tweet input like greens out for a second, and then it snaps, like it like instantly loads onto the page. Let's take a look at what the code looks like for that. So here's the big hairy body that came out wrong again. Oh my gosh, I'm catching that like as I speak. Okay, so post tweet. Here's the big method, a lot of stuff going on. We have some busy state, we have some Axios. Again, we're throwing out the tweet to the server. What I want to focus on is what happens after we hear success from the server that says, hey, we posted the tweet okay. So this is an area that always gets me. It's a super common pattern. And actually, if I were to write a Twitter clone, I'd probably do this because you're not going to get the UI fidelity, the clean, slick, that you're going to get when you're doing this sort of thing. But this is where things tend to break down for me, because you're doing so much. Like right here, this.tweets came from the backend. That came from the server side. But what am I pushing to it? I'm pushing on something I created on the front end. So I'm hard coding the structure of a tweet. And then if the backend changes, you get a little bit of drift. And if you don't have the right test to catch all that, then things start to break down. So when this becomes the case, when you feel like these things are getting out of control and you're doing a lot and it becomes a liability, window.location.reload. Yeah, so I'm here to tell you, it is not a sin. I needed to tell myself that, because I like started to write this thing, and I was like, nah, this is not okay. Like, this is the kind of thing you don't want to show your friends, that you type window.location.reload. But, because it just reloads the page. But it's awesome. It absolves you of all the dependencies and all the front-end heavy lifting that you had to do before. So sometimes it's not the right call. Like, in actuality, it's a full page reload. And if that is just not cool for you, if that's too janky, then don't use it. But it's an option. So use that. You have a cost-benefit analysis to do. All right. So we're not mutating tweets anymore, because before we had this.tweets.push, where we were mutating it. Now we're not. So we can make it a prop. So we can get rid of that whole weird initial tweets thing and just pass tweets through as a prop. So we cleaned up some stuff. That's nice. So now we say, hi, Mom. It grays out for a second, and then it still kind of snaps on the page. If you have browser caching, it's not a full page refresh. If the user didn't have browser caching on, it would be. If there's a slow connection, you'll notice that the busy state is a little bit longer. But it's still pretty good. Like, that's worth it to me. That's totally worth it to me. All right, so this is where we left things. This.tweet.push is where the method is mutating the data. We can kill that. And now we're not doing that initial tweets thing, so we don't have to put that in the data. And the tweets will go straight to the computed property now. So we got rid of some more arrows. We're cleaning it up. Move logic from JavaScript to PHP. So here's our computed properties, fresh tweets and in case you missed it tweets. Bless you. Fresh tweets and in case you missed it tweets. Take a look at what that does. Tweets before was mutable, but now it's immutable. So the tweets we get when the view component loads, we're sticking with them. They're staying the whole time. So we don't need this logic to live in JavaScript, where when they were changing, it had to be in JavaScript because it had to react. It had to change along with the changing tweets. So because we're not mutating it, we can take this logic and pull it up into the backend and pass it through as a prop. So check that out. Pass it through as a prop, kill the computeds, and there we go. We're not even passing tweets anymore. We're just passing fresh tweets and in case you missed it tweets. And then change that. Pretty sweet. All right, now here's our controller. So where before in this controller we were passing tweets at the front end, now we're doing the composition logic. That's composition presentation logic, that whole thing that Matt was talking about where you might want to use responsible and stuff like that. That's right here. So if this starts to bloat up your controller, use a responsible object, use something else, that's fine. But this is composition logic that you first think should live in your view component. But magical things happen when you pull it back into PHP. So check out our test from before. This is what our test was. This is broken now because tweets doesn't exist as an object in our view. So we change it. we'll create some fresh tweets, and in case you missed it, and then we'll assert that there's fresh tweets, and in case you missed it. And something like subtle but significant just happened there. This is the sauce for me. Because we took behavior logic from our front end and we pulled it into the back end under the PHP umbrella, it's now under the PHP unit umbrella, which is my favorite thing to test stuff with because it's right by all your PHP. It's right in your feature test, the whole thing. So now when I run PHP unit, I know that run exercised composition logic, which is significant. For me, these are the things that build confidence in my front end. You can write a front-end test for this computed property. You can write a jest test, that's fine. But you have to mock out the Axios call, and you have to hard code that or manage something with that, and you get mock drift, and you have to have a contract test, and blah, 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 blah. This is all right there, and it's tested, and it's great. Okay, so this is where we were at before. And we killed the computeds. We're passing them in as props now, so they go directly to the template. So all these things are starting to clear up. We got a little circle going on here. So let's tackle the final little double way arrow. Use forms. So this is where we're at. We get the busy state. It shows up on the page. And there's a page reload there, but we don't really see it. And then here's how we refactored it. We have window.location.reload in our then statement. But there's still a lot going on here. We're still dealing with two pieces of data right there. We're dealing with our busy state and our errors state. So let's see if we can get that out of there. And the way we're going to do this is our old friend, the form tag. Yeah, so this is the OG Axios. This is Axios, the good old days. You specify a method, you specify a route and a payload, and you don't have to assign a catch or anything like that. It's great. So with form tags in Laravel, you need CSRF tokens. So I made a little component. Tweet at me if you want me to share the source. And then this is what was happening before. We're listening for the submit event, and then we were firing post tweet, which fired off that view method. So that's what was happening before. Now when I hear that submit event, I want to submit the form. So how do you submit a form? However you want to submit a form. Document.forms.posttweet.submit works. You could have a ref, you could have a button, or input type submit, whatever. It all works. So that's what we're doing now. And so if we actually do this, it's not going to work because there's no payload. We'll get a validation error back. So how do you pass a payload through a form tag? Input elements. So I have a little hidden input element whose sole purpose in life is just to store data for the backend. So I name it, whatever I want to name it, body, and then I bind the value attribute to tweet, and then it's reactive as well. So it's sitting there when the form submits, then this data will submit along with it. This can also get kind of crazy if you're like submitting objects or arrays or stuff, but I have a little package that helps me for that. So again, tweet at me and I'll hook you up. All right, so this is where we're at. We can kill this whole thing because we're using a form tag now. So that's gone. And now when we submit, we don't see the loading like the busy signal. We don't see that. It just loads right away. So it feels very much like a native form submission. If that's not cool with you, you can still set the busy state and just forget about it. I do that a lot. You just set the busy state so that it looks and feels kind of like native-ish, but it's not. It's just a form submission. But I actually broke validation because before we were catching the errors and now we're not. So this is what it was before. It would wait for the busy state, hear back from the server, and then push the validation errors. So how do we get validation errors when we're submitting native form submissions? The error message bag that's available to you for free with Laravel. So we can just pass that through the errors prop, and it's totally available for us. We didn't really have to change anything in Vue at all. We're still just pulling in errors into Vue. So there we go. We can kill errors, we can kill busy, we're not doing that anymore. And that's where we're at. We've totally cleaned stuff up. So now we submit it, and we get the validation message right away. All right, so we killed the whole post method thing. So we can kill that whole thing, and then now we're just submitting the form directly to the server, which happens to look like a smiley face, which I think is pretty sweet. That's affirmation that it's the right refactor. I am loving it. Thank you. I made a smiley face. So yeah, use forms. So here's the 4 takeaways. Use props Use them as much as you can. I totally love that pattern. Thank you, Jesse. Pass through as much as you can into JavaScript. When you're doing this, like this technique, you can use your route helper, you can use the old helper, you can use your trans helper, all sorts of awesome Blade things that worked before for free, you can use with this prop stuff. Don't be scared of window.location.reload. It's just another, this or that type of thing. Sometimes it's the right thing to use. It's not a sin, it's not heresy, and it's kind of fun. Move logic from JavaScript to PHP. This is maybe the biggest one. When I started doing this, this is the superpower. When you take this stuff and move it back, you run PHP unit, it's fast, it exercises all this front-end stuff. So, and use form tags. Sometimes they're the right thing to do. You don't have to use Axios. Sometimes you need Ajax. Sometimes form tags are perfectly fine and they still work. So this is what we had before, and it's pretty colorful. And here's what it is now. It's less colorful, and it's smaller, which is great. Yeah, right? Isn't it funny how the demo always works out in my favor? It's great. That would really suck if it didn't. Okay, so here's the data interaction that we had before. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. And that's the interaction that we have now. Does this resonate with you? Does it? Anybody? Is anybody yeah? Yeah, if this resonates with you, well, tweet at me or follow me on Twitter. And this is something that I've been really pushing hard for the past year. Super passionate about it. And there's so many other little nooks and crannies of this paradigm, embracing the back end. And I'm super excited to share stuff. So I'll be blogging, maybe even coursing, who knows? That seems to be the thing to do. Scared of your front end? Embrace the back end. Thank you.